The honourable member for Prince Albert.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise in the House at third reading in support of Bill C-38, the Jobs, Growth and Long-Term Prosperity Act, and the important steps it takes to implement Canada's Economic Action Plan 2012. Specifically, I'd like to discuss the many ways that today's act will strengthen Canada's immigration system. We all recognize that Canada needs a flexible and efficient immigration system. Practically speaking, we need an immigration system capable of addressing the very real labour shortages faced by communities right across Canada, and especially in my home province of Saskatchewan. As Chris Decker of Enterprise Saskatchewan has noted, labour shortages and demands are the #1 barrier to doing business in Saskatchewan. It's no longer a provincial NDP government, Mr. Speaker, it's actually labour shortages. The degree of labour shortages has forced the provincial government to undertake numerous creative recruitment efforts, such as a recent skilled workers recruitment mission in Ireland, led by our Premier Brad Wall, and numerous Saskatchewan businesses. Give them credit. They went out and looked for the skills that their employers needed and sought the people that were looking for jobs. What a way to bring them together, and I give the Premier credit for doing that, to go into Ireland and recruiting those people. To assist the good work of our province, our Conservative government has made significant progress in recent years to refocus our system to reduce backlogs, reverse wait times, and improve the timeliness of service we provide. These reforms ultimately ensure that Canada's economic prosperity is our system's #1 priority. For example, we have placed a high value of attracting newcomers to Canada with the skills and experiences to meet the economic demands of Canadians. But we need to do more, Mr. Speaker. We must deliver transformational changes to the immigration system that will better generate economic growth and long-term prosperity for Canadians. We envision a just-in-time system in which the entire process for skilled immigrants to apply to come to Canada, be accepted and admitted, and become gainfully employed takes only a few months instead of many years. To achieve this vision, we first addressed the legacy of a large backlog of applicants under the Federal Skilled Workers Program. We took measures to address this dysfunctional Federal Skilled Workers backlog of 640,000 persons that is allowed to fester under the previous Liberal government. But the fact remains that we still have a backlog of nearly 300,000 old Federal Skilled Workers applicants. I am pleased to inform the House today that the Economic Action Plan 2012, along with today's Act, will help us to reform immigration system so that it aligns more closely with our economic needs, so that it achieves better results, both for newcomers and for Canadians. Reforms, I note, that have been warmly welcomed in Saskatchewan and beyond. Canadian Home Builders Association President Ron Olson of Saskatoon has applauded the Economic Action Plan 2012's immigrants reform, saying, and I quote, "We have urged the government to address the growing shortage of skilled people required to build and renovate homes. We're pleased that the budget tackles this issue." Or listen to what Janice McKinnon, former NDP finance minister in Saskatchewan, had to say. Somebody from Western Canada, our biggest problem are labour shortages. We have projects that can't proceed because they can't find skilled workers. The changes they're proposing in Economic Action Plan 2012 to immigration matters to us so that we can get the immigrants we want when we want them. How are we doing that? First, we will eliminate the backlog of old Federal Skilled Workers applicants that has been nearly crippled our immigration system. This will transform the Federal Skilled Workers Program from one that has moved at a snail's pace for older applicants to one that's able to bring to Canada the people we need when they in fact are needed. The backlog hurts our economy by impeding our system's ability to respond quickly to our changing economic priorities. As a result, we will now be able to shift our processing priority towards fewer Federal Skilled Worker applicants who are more likely to have the current in-demand skills that our economy requires. To ensure that Canada's immigration system will benefit our economic future, Canada needs immigrants who are ready, willing, and able to fully integrate into Canada's labour markets, particularly where there is existing skills shortages. But we also need to make sure that the skilled immigrants we choose are the ones Canada needs, and that, once they arrive here, they are able to put their skills to use immediately. Economic Action Plan 2012 also commits to continuing working with the provinces and the territories to speed up the streamline the credential recognition process for regulated professions. Under the Pan-Canadian Framework for Assessment and Recognition of Foreign Qualifications, our goal is to give applicants an answer within a year of their application. We can tell skilled professionals whether their credentials will be recognized or if they will require additional education, training, or experience to become a license in their field. To date, we have processed in place 8 regulated occupations, and we're working to 6 additional regulated occupations to add to this list this year. We have also made considerable progress towards improving the foreign credential recognition process for many newcomers who are already here in Canada. But we can and must do more. Skilled immigrants come to Canada with the expectations that they'll be able to work in the profession in which they are trained. And we owe it to them to ensure that this is actually the case. That is why changes we are proposing to our immigration system will ensure mandatory assessment of foreign educated credentials to Federal Skilled Workers Program and applicants. This would involve a new requirement for applicants to first have their overseas education credentials assessed by a designated third party before they're accepted. The results of this assessment will be part of the immigration application. The process would be separate from more in-depth assessments that regulatory bodies will use to license professionals from abroad. Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government believes that by working together, we can find practical ways to give people a green light before they get to Canada, especially if we know that they're going to have a better than ever chance of being licensed and joining the workforce here in Canada. Our goals with this change is better to select immigrants so they can hit the ground running once they arrive by integrating quickly into our labour market. And this is part of our broader challenges we are proposing to improve the Federal Skilled Workers Program, bringing in line with the needs of our modern economy. For instance, we are working to introduce a new skilled trades program that would create a means for skilled tradespersons to be assessed based on criteria geared to the reality of the job, putting more emphasis on practical training and work experience. Mr. Speaker, it's a common sense that we ensure that immigrants will fuel the future prosperity. We need a system that will help position Canada to attract the world's best talent. That's why our Conservative government is committed to strengthening the immigration system to make it a truly proactive, targeted, fast, and efficient to help sustain Canada's economic growth and deliver prosperity into the future. In the words of the Canadian Construction Association, or CCA, one of the many supporters of the portion of C-38, and I quote, CCA was encouraged by the measures outlined to build a fast, flexible immigration system. In order to continue to build the economy and remain cost competitive, businesses across Canada must have access to required skilled workers in order to grow and take advantage of the tremendous international demand for Canadian products and services. Mr. Speaker, I join the Canadian Construction Association and others asking that this House support and pass today's legislation. You know, Mr. Speaker, when I go back to my province and my riding, and I talk to constituents in the riding, they talk about this budget, they see so many benefits and structural changes to our future economy. It really lays a proper foundation for Canada to grow and move into the future. This is a good budget, Mr. Speaker. I just can't see why anybody would get against or would be against voting against this budget. I encourage all members to get behind this budget and move it forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Bravo.
Question commentaire. The honourable member for Algoma, Manitoulin-Kapuskasing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you know, I listened intently to what the member had to say, and I just don't understand where they're coming from. On one hand, they're saying that we have to fill the skilled labor shortage, and on the other hand, they want to take skilled labor people and force them into other jobs. These are seasonal workers, and force them into other jobs that doesn't even really meet their skills, because we're going to be not using them for their full potential. But at the same time, they're going to be creating a void in the seasonal workforce. And where are these people going to get their training skills? Where are you going to get people to fill those out? If you're forcing them to go, if you're forcing the seasonal workers to go work somewhere else, and then they can't go back to their seasonal jobs, so maybe the member can tell me, will they be able to go back to their seasonal jobs? And will they be penalized for going back to their seasonal jobs?
Member for Prince Albert.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for the question. I just unfortunate that she doesn't understand how the process is going to work, and as we see it unfold, hopefully she'll get a better understanding of why this is better for all of Canada. But I'll use the example of what happens on the farm in Saskatchewan, what's happened throughout the last 15 or 20 years. We have a lot of farmers that they farm throughout the summer and spring. They're grain farmers. Once the snow hits in the fall, they've got all their grain hauled out, or a chunk of their grain hauled out. In fact, now that we no longer have a CWB, they actually can control that even better and how they control their product. But they actually go into Alberta or into southern Saskatchewan now, and they work in the oil patch. They take on those jobs in the wintertime. They take on that seasonal work. That's something that's there, something they can take advantage of. That's what happens when you have a strong, vibrant economy, because then there's all sorts of opportunity. You have actually choice of employment. But when you take on policies that actually restrict business activity, that actually suppress people, which the NDP government did in Saskatchewan, well, then what happens is it forces your kids to go to another province to find a job. hopefully, with all these changes in this budget, we'll see so much economic activity across Canada that issue will actually take care of itself.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to challenge the member in terms of his assertions in regards to immigration and the backlog. The member should be aware that, in fact, this particular Minister of Immigration, through ministerial instructions, increased the backlog significantly, over 150,000, virtually overnight because of ministerial instructions, number one. Then the minister tries to say, well, we're going to try to get rid of this backlog and tries to blame it on the former Liberal government. When in reality, Mr. Speaker, it is in fact this government that needs to take responsibility in regards to the skilled workers backlog. And now, Mr. Speaker, to put icing on the cake, what the government has done is they've made a decision to hit the delete button. And my question...
Order. The honourable member for Winnipeg North has the floor. I'm sure the honourable member for Prince Albert would like to hear the question. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and what happens is they push the delete button for those individuals that were in the process. Cruel policy, I would suggest to you, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, my question is, now that the federal court has ruled that what this government has done is morally wrong, would the member not agree that those individuals that put in to come as a skilled worker should be allowed to at least go through the process?
Honourable member for Prince Albert.
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate that a member has misstrued the facts and what's actually going on, and I'll maybe explain it to him as we go through. The reality is that they had a system that we inherited from the Liberal government that was totally inadequate, totally not functioning in a way that was appropriate for both the employer or the person trying to come to Canada. You tell me how it can be acceptable when you're sitting on a waiting list for 6 years to find out whether you're going to be able to come into the country. That's something that we inherited from the Liberal government. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? I want to clarify one other thing that's going to happen. Yes, there will be a reduction in the backlog. We'll take and give the money back to the people that are sitting in the queue, that have been sitting in the queue for 6 years. But you know what? They can apply right away, and they're going to know within a year right away. They're not going to wait for 6 more years to get their application processed. That's what the Liberals think is acceptable. You know what? Let's have 10 kids and wait the entire life.
Order. The questions and comments. We have time for one more short question and response. The honourable member for Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In reviewing, going back and looking at our budget document, some 498 pages long. Of course, not expecting a budget implementation bill that's going to be 12 pages long, but wow, looking in here, hidden on page 146 and several pages forward are changes to the employment insurance. And we find them, of course, in our budget bill, as budget implementation bill. Can the member comment on the positive aspects of the changes that we've been debating now since the end of March?
Member for Prince Albert.
Well, again, I thank my colleague for the great question, and I appreciate the hard work he does representing constituents in his riding. I'd like to also congratulate him on the hard work he's done in bringing that new bridge to his riding. It's been something that's just has been needed for such a long time, and I just want to congratulate him for getting that job done, and I really think you did a great job there. And far as the unemployment insurance, you know, that's one thing that I found talking to businesses out of Prince Albert. They're actually looking for employees from areas where there was high unemployment insurance, and the first thing that came back when they approached those people with the job is, you know what, I've got another 5-6 months of unemployment insurance, so I'm just going to wait till that runs out, and then maybe I'll take the job. Actually, we're just kind of correcting some of those problems and making it easier so that those people can find a job that much quicker.
Absolutely.